All right, well, welcome everyone. We are here to host the Ridley Democrats poll greeting and poll watching orientation. My name is Jen Rieger Murphy, and I'm joined by my colleague Bella Engelbach, and we are both Democratic Committee people with Ridley Township Democrats. So tonight we are going to talk about the upcoming election, which is our Pennsylvania primary, and that's going to be on Tuesday, May 17th. We're going to go over what it means to be a poll greeter, and in some cases, if you're going to be doing poll watching, what that would look like as well. So tonight's agenda will be focused in two parts. We'll first start about poll greeting, and this will be good for people who are returning to poll greeting because we will have new information on this specific election. So for some, it may be a little bit of a primer with some new information, and then for people who are brand new, this is going to be very informative to you. We'll cover pre-election day prep, so things you want to be aware of before you come to your polling location. We'll talk about the goals of being a greeter and where your polling location will be. We'll go over what the ballots are going to look like, and then we'll cover the actual setup of election day, what happens during election day, things to be aware of. And then Bella's going to cover what it means to be a poll watcher, looking at partisan behavior, things that you might see at the polls as a poll watcher, ways that you can be aware of voter assistance, things regarding voter protection, and then what you'll do at the end of the night when you close the polls. So we'll go over poll greeter goals first. Overall, first and foremost, we are to be the friendly face of the Democratic Party and the candidates that are within the Democratic Party that are running for election. So first and foremost, you are your own person. You're coming to this with your own interests and skill sets, but just remember that you are representing the Democratic Party on election day. We want to be welcoming to all of the voters. Everybody is coming to exercise their right to vote, and that's a very profound right to have. And we want to be welcoming of all people, regardless of what party they are affiliated with. We'll invite people to a sample Democratic ballot that they can take in with them. This is a closed primary, so we're basically trying to engage with our Democratic voters. Republicans are not going to want our ballot and vice versa, so just keep that in mind. We will offer people the coveted I voted stickers. This is definitely the hot item of the day. Everyone wants their sticker, and we'll offer it to anyone that wants it when they come out of the polls. We will be there to answer questions for people. Some of what you'll learn tonight is going to work for you on election day. You'll be able to answer basic questions for people. If you don't know the answer to something, that is okay. Not every, there are even times when we don't know the answer to something, and there's always somebody that is going to know. So if you don't know the answer, you're going to just be informed of who to direct them to answer that. And I have on the list calling voters. That's probably not likely going to happen this time, but on occasion we will call voters to follow up, just to remind them to come out to vote. Okay, so next for your election day prep, this will be things to think about before you actually come to your polling place on election day. So first and foremost, you want to be comfortable and also presentable at the same time. So, some people will maybe be doing a 2 or 4 hour shift. Some may be doing multiple shifts. And for some of us, we're working 12 to 14 hours in the day. So comfort is definitely a priority. You'll want to be wearing comfortable clothes and especially comfortable shoes. You'll want to consider the elements. So we've had election days in all sorts of weather. It's important to be, warm when it's cold, dry when it's wet outside, et cetera. So the forecast, knock on wood, fingers crossed, is 78 degrees, mostly cloudy, but with some sun. So you'll want to just make sure that you have some things if you really need them, like, maybe some sunscreen or a hat, sunglasses, things like that. I haven't needed bug spray yet, but that's always a good thing to have in your back pocket, just in case. We do try to staff all polling places with a table and a set of chairs, but we may have a couple greeters all at the same time who are maybe taking a break and sitting. So if you really are someone that feels like you might need a chair and you have something that's portable, I would say maybe keep it in your car or bring it with you just in case. Snacks and beverage are always a plus to bring with you depending on how long your shift is. I know I have to eat like every 2 hours or for my blood sugar, so I always have food and beverages ready to go. Some polling places may have some of these items available as well. Like I know I bring snacks and some water to my polling place, but it might vary depending on where you go. So it's always good to just have your own things just as a backup. Sometimes election days are light with voters, and there's definitely downtime in between certain hours. So morning, before work, lunch, around dinner time, those are typically the times that get the busiest. But for some hours in between, you might find that you need a book to read or some downtime. A lot of our poll graders are great company too, and you'll usually be with other people. So there's that, but you might want to just bring something in addition for some downtime activity. Additional pre-election day prep, know your polling location assignment. Many of you have probably interacted with Margaret, who is our volunteer coordinator. She has likely given you all of the details you need. We are going to go in the next few slides, we will talk about where those locations are and what they where you'll find them. So just keep that in mind. And we'll also familiarize you with the ballot. So we will have some pictures and sample ballots to show you later in the presentation. But for just a breakdown of who's running for office in this primary, it's basically candidates at the state and the federal levels for the most part. So at the state level, we have the state Pennsylvania House of Representatives, the state Senate, we have a governor's race and a lieutenant governor's race. And at the federal level, we have the House of Representatives, so our congressperson, and then the US Senate. Now, you can go to this website and we can send you the link upon request, but it'll basically tell you what your sample ballot is based on the precinct and ward that you're representing. But please know we're actually going to have printouts of these sample ballots at the tables on election day, so you will have them the day of. So we have in Ridley Township, we have 9 wards and we have about 20 precincts. So to notice what your ward is, it's the first number that you see listed, and then the precinct is the second number. So the first example would be the Knights of Columbus is Ward 1, Precinct 1, and that's, you know, the address that you see there is where you would go if that's where you were assigned. Most wards have 2 precincts, and then there's some that have 3. So as you can see in Ward 1, there are 3 precincts, but there are only 2 places to vote. So Ward 1, Precinct 1, and Ward 1, Precinct 3 are at Knights of Columbus, and Ward 1, Precinct 2 is at Water's Edge Banquet Hall. So these are some of the places where you might have been assigned to vote, and Margaret has likely given you this address as well. And then this is just to kind of round out all the wards and precincts. This is where the rest of our voters will go to vote based on where they're located. For example, I'm in 6-1, but my polling place includes 6-1 and 6-2, so it's very convenient because I can cover 2 polling places at once. And then we do have some where they're actually split into 2 or 3 locations. So who is on the ballot? As I mentioned, you can go to the website and find these sample ballots based on your ward and precinct that you're covering. On election day, this is actually what the ballot will look like that people fill out. So we will have sample ballots that look similar to this, but this is what a ballot will look like. So for example, when you look at this ballot, you'll see that there are 4 candidates for United States Senator. There's 1 for governor. There's 3 for lieutenant governor. There's 1 for Congress, 1 for for state Senate, and 1 for the state House. So these are the offices that are represented in this election. On the second page of the ballot, we have candidates that are running for the Delaware County Democratic State Committee. And so these are the candidates that are running within Delaware County, which Ridley Township is a part of. So basically, we'll get into this in the sample ballot. There are 6 people that are endorsed for this, but there's actually 13 spots. So voters will be instructed that they can vote up to 6 females, 6 males, and then 1 additional member who could be male or female for a total of 13. The other thing to keep in mind on this ballot is that we have people running for the Democratic Committee in Ridley Township. So like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Bella and I are members of the Democratic Committee. This is actually the sample ballot with my name on it, and Bella will have one on her sample ballot as well. So here are what the sample ballots look like, which we will actually have outside the polling place. You can give these to voters who identify as Democrat, and they can take this in with them as a guide to voting. And it's just a suggestion. They can obviously do and vote for whoever on this list that they want. But these are, when you look at this ballot, you're going to see that the endorsed candidates are those that have their boxes filled in. So when you look at this, one thing to note is that the United States Senator, we did not endorse anyone at the county level or the Ridley Township level. So really it's, you know, the voter will make the choice that's best for them. For governor, we have endorsed Josh Shapiro. For lieutenant governor, out of the 3 that are running, we have endorsed at the county level Austin Davis, because that is the person that Josh Shapiro believes will be his best running mate. We are all exclusively endorsing Mary Gay Scanlon for Congress, and Tim Carney for state Senate, and Dave DeLoso for representative in the General Assembly. Now, we will get into candidates in a little bit, but you'll want to note that there are several people, mainly Leanne Kruger and Dave DeLoso, who are running in Ridley Township. So depending on the polling place you're representing, that will determine the representative that is listed there. And then the sample ballot on the flip side will show those people that we mentioned that are running for the Democratic Committee, who are endorsed. So Jennifer Toof, Rob Yanuzzi, Lisa Goldstein, Malcolm Yates, Vince Rangione, and Amanda Hammock. Let's see. I think we mentioned everything here. The one thing I'll just say though, oh yes, the committee members. Thank you, Bella. So the committee members for you know, a particular area would be someone like myself if I was running on this particular sample ballot. The same for Bella. There may be places you're working where the committee member, there is no one running for committee member. So if you see it blank, don't be worried. It just means that someone has not filed to be on that part of the position for the ballot. The other thing to remember is that there's no straight party voting. So people can no longer, and this has happened for the last few election cycles, so if people have voted recently, they'll be familiar with this, but for someone who may not have voted in the last few years, there's no straight party voting anymore in Pennsylvania. So people can't just go in and fill out one box and say vote straight Democrat anymore. You have to instruct them to fill out each box for each office that they want to vote for. They will be reminded of this when they go to get their ballot inside the polling place, but if someone were to ask you if that's still a thing, straight voting is no longer an option. So these are the people that are running at the federal level. These are the candidates. So for the US Senate, we have 4 people that are on the ballot. And as I mentioned before, we decided not to endorse any one particular candidate over the other. They're all quite honestly really great candidates. So it'll be great to see who comes out on top. From left to right, we have Malcolm Kenyatta. He is a current state representative in Harrisburg. He is a community organizer from Philadelphia. John Fetterman is our current lieutenant governor. He is the former mayor of Braddock, a town in Western Pennsylvania. A fun fact about him, he actually won by 1 vote as mayor. So when people say every vote matters, he is proof of that in his mayoral race. Connor Lamb is a current member of Congress. He represents Pittsburgh in the Beaver County area of Western Pennsylvania. And Alexandria Khalil is the current Jenkintown Borough Council member. She is also a community organizer, and she is from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. For the House of Representatives, Mary Gay Scanlon is running for her 3rd term to be elected, and she represents the 5th district that includes Ridley Township. At the state level, we have Josh Shapiro. He is running for governor. He's the current attorney general. He has chosen Lieutenant Governor candidate Austin Davis, who is a current state rep in Harrisburg. And we have Leanne Kruger, who is our current state rep in some of our wards and precincts. Like I said, you'll see on the sample ballot whether or not she's representing that particular ward and precinct that you are representing on election day. And the same goes for State Rep Dave DeLoso, who is currently serving in the House in Harrisburg. And lastly, we have State Senator candidate Tim Carney. He's our current state senator. He is an architect by trade, a small business owner, and he is a two-term former mayor of Swarthmore. So now that we've gotten a little bit of the election day prep out of the way, we'll talk about what happens the day of. So in the morning, if you are starting out the day with us, we will be doing setup with table and chairs. We'll have sample ballots at the table like we had reviewed earlier. We'll have candidate information. So some of the candidates and campaigns may drop off literature. So if we're representing one of Leanne Kruger's polling places, you may see her literature there, same for Dave Deloso. And then some of the campaigns may actually come and drop literature off or have people grading as well. So we'll probably have quite a variety of literature at our table. We'll also have the I voted stickers. We'll have plenty of those. We may have a volunteer sign-up form. That's something that if people come to the table and express interest in, we would then take that information, but we should not be asking for that information before people go and vote. It could be interpreted as a sign of voter intimidation. So it's only really if they come up to you and say, you know, I'd love to get more information from you, you could then take their name and their email and contact info. We've listed strike lists here, but that's something we're not going to really get into this time around. But basically a strike list is something that a poll watcher may bring with them into the polling place, and they would track who has come in to vote so that we could then potentially take the list outside and call those who have not yet come in to vote. I don't think we're planning on using those this time around though. A couple things to remember about the setup, that we should be set up at least a minimum of 10 feet away from the entrance to the polling place. If you have any concerns or questions about that, the judge of elections, what we call the JO, can identify where that location is if needed. Greeters and poll workers, if you're going into the polling place to use the restroom or to maybe get food or something or charge your phone, one thing you just have to keep in mind is that anything with candidate information must be left outside or must be hidden. So if you have campaign buttons or if you have clothing on that talks about your candidate, you have to hide it in some way or remove it before you go in. That would be considered politicking within the polling place. And lastly, greeters should make sure that the pathway is clear for voters. So you may see like these two people pictured together, like maybe they're standing very close to the walkway. You want to make sure that that path is clear so that it's not seen as, you know, a form of intimidation. So next up is the people that you will see on election day, the different types of people. First and foremost, you're going to see voters, and that's always exciting when people are exercising their right to vote. They're usually very excited to do so, so that's always good. And you may engage with people who are just thrilled to see Democrats greeting at these polling places. It's not too long ago where I was the sole greeter at my polling place, and that's grown substantially over time, and people would come up and say, I'm really glad that you're here. So it is exciting to have that connection with people on election day. The other thing you'll see, you may meet some candidates. They may be stopping by different polling places. Certainly the local state reps like Leanne Kruger and Dave Deloso come to their polling places and they greet the voters and the poll greeters and watchers. And this will be happening outside the polls, by the way. They're not going to be greeting inside the polls. You'll see Republican greeters, so our counterparts on the Republican side. And then, you know, you may see campaign candidate greeters. So you may have people from the different US Senate races there. You may see people for John Fetterman or for Malcolm Kenyatta. You may see different people representing the Democrat State Committee campaigns as well. So just be mindful that we're not the only greeters there. There may be other people representing specific candidates. You may briefly see a JOE or a judge of elections coming out. They may take a break or come out to talk to some of the greeters, but usually they are inside. You may see them briefly though. You may see poll watchers as well. I'm a poll watcher that day, but I also do poll greetings, so I kind of just go in and out and I float around. So you may see people like that at your polling place. You may also encounter lawyers for election protection. It's not something to really be worried about. They're generally going to come from either side of the aisle. So you may have lawyers representing Democrats and lawyers representing Republicans. They generally come in and check on polling places to make sure that there are no signs of voter intimidation, that the lines are not too long, that things are moving along smoothly. So they may just come up to you and say, how do things look today? They may say, do you know who's running point on your side today? And in most cases, that's the poll watcher. So they may ask a couple of questions, just don't be worried about that. And then lastly, you might see some constables. Generally, We have police that will come, and Bella's going to talk about this a little bit as well for poll watching. They may come just to cast their vote and leave. They're generally not supposed to be lingering, but constables may stay there if the judge of election asks them to preserve the peace. So what happens on the inside? As a poll greeter, you may not see much of this unless you're in there just to briefly use the restroom or get a snack or something like that. But these are the people that work inside the polls on election day. First and foremost, we have the judge of elections. They'll oversee the election day activities in general and oversee the polls. So they'll help with the setup of the system. They'll close the system at the end of the night. They conduct paperwork to make sure the poll greeter, the poll workers get paid, and they actually return the election supplies at the end of the night. We have majority and minority inspectors. These are people that oversee the sign-in books where the voters come in to sign, and they also oversee the distribution of the ballots. So in a primary, if somebody comes in and they realize they're a registered Democrat, they need to make sure that they get the sample, or that they get the actual Democratic ballot, and the same for Republicans. The difference between the two is the majority inspector is the elected official in the majority party of that ward and precinct. So in my case, the majority inspector is a Republican because there are more registered Republicans than registered Democrats. And then we have the minority inspector from the Democratic Party. Clerks assist the inspectors, and they oversee a second book that lists the order of voters. So as someone is signing in with a minority or majority inspector, the clerk is writing the name of the person so that they can actually track the order in which the voters voted. We have machine inspectors. They assist in the ballot scanning operations and make sure that everything is functioning normally. And lastly, we have poll watchers. So these are people that are appointed. They have certificates to be in the polling place, and they are just there to be a presence and to make sure that everything is running smoothly and that there are no concerns. No candidates should be in the polling places. So if someone were to come in and hang around and be greeting people inside the polling place, that's a no-no. Police officers, as mentioned before, should only be in the polling place when they're voting. And then, you want to make sure you're aware of anyone who's having an issue with voting and potentially being turned away without any resources. The most common one we see is people who come in and they're at the wrong polling place. So are you observing that the judge of elections is trying to get them the right information to know where to go for their polling place, things like that. The clerk and other poll workers can assist in giving the ballots to voters. They can assist at the request of the JOE. So as long as there's a good relationship there, things tend to run really smoothly. So sample greeting techniques. For a primary, it's pretty simple because you're really just trying to give sample ballots to Democrats. You're not really trying to push your candidate on, not push, but you're not really trying to endorse your candidate for any party, because in Pennsylvania, the primaries are closed, which means Democrats that are registered Democrats can only vote for Democratic candidates. So they're basically choosing the people in their party that are going to go up against the opposition in the general election. So really the only thing that you need to be asking people, in addition to greeting them and welcoming them and thanking them to vote, is basically something to the effect of, good morning, would you like a sample Democratic ballot? And this is going to identify right away if they are with the party of the Democrats or if they are a Republican. Keep in mind that some people forget which party they're registered in, because if they're generally voting in elections that you can really elect anyone you want, which we call a general election, then they may not even pay attention to the fact that they're in a different party. But sometimes people come up to the polling place when they sign in and they're like, I'm not a registered Democrat, or I'm not a registered Republican. So sometimes they forget which party they're from, but most times people know what they're know which party they're with for the primary. So asking that question is usually a simple way to identify who needs your Democratic ballot. Even if a Republican greeter offers a sample ballot to someone, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily Republican. We've seen this happen in the past, and Democrats are very happy to see a representative from the party. I've seen the Republicans give a sample ballot to someone, and then I say, would you like to see a sample Democratic ballot? And they're like, yes, thank God that you're here. So just keep that in mind. Don't make the assumption that the Republicans know all the people in their party. They certainly do know some of them, but it doesn't mean that they're not giving people the wrong ballot. As voters are leaving, you want to offer them the I voted sticker. So just keep that in mind. And you can collect names of future volunteers after they have voted, like we mentioned. I would only do it in cases where they actually come up to you and say, I'd love to get more involved. I wouldn't sit behind the table and say, would you, please sign this to get more information, things like that. So the top questions that we get asked as poll greeters, first and foremost, is this my polling location? They can go to vote 411 on their phone if they want to discover where their polling place is. A lot of our poll greeters who have done this before are usually assigned to the same place, so they may have become familiar with the streets within the polling place, the precinct. So they may know where people need to go right off the bat. But if you don't, you can direct them to vote 411, and they can just put their address in, and it'll tell them. If they don't have a phone and you don't have a phone, they can go right into our polling place and inquire within. The judge of elections can call and find out where they need to go if they're not, in fact, in the right place. Another question we might get is, do I need an ID to vote? The only time that someone needs an ID to vote is if they are voting at the polling place for the first time. And what I mean by that is not necessarily they're voting for the first time ever. It's the first time they're voting in that polling place. So maybe they just moved here and they've changed their registration. They would need to show an ID. There's several different forms of acceptable photo identification, and they're all listed in this image here. So some of them are, Pennsylvania driver's license, a US passport, a student ID, an employee ID, something that identifies them as a resident. And if they don't have a photo ID, there's also other forms. So like a current utility bill or a bank statement, something that has the address on it. Again, if you don't need to know all of this on election day. We do have people in the polling place that can help them with this, but it's nice to just have this information in case you need it. The other question we get is, I have my mail-in ballot with me. Can I drop it off here? The answer is no, they cannot. So we do have Dropbox locations, and there is a link here that you can check out. They have to be submitted by 8 p.m. on election day in any of the drop boxes that are listed. They can also take it to the Delaware County Board of Elections in media and drop it off there. Again, it has to be received by 8 p.m. The other option they can do if they have the mail-in ballot with them is they can surrender it with the return envelopes, and they can vote provisionally at the polling place. So those are their three options. They can just return them in drop boxes, or they can surrender and do the provisional vote. Again, the judge of elections is going to know all this information. So if it's a little fuzzy to you, or this is your first rodeo, we can definitely, the polling workers can definitely assist in those questions. Other resources for answers, like I mentioned, were those poll greeters and also the judge of elections. So that concludes our poll greeting section. I thank you for your attention. I know there was a lot of detail here, but we really do appreciate, we want everyone to feel like they have all the resources that they need to do this. There will be seasoned veterans of poll greeting there, so they will be there to guide you, but we hope that you found this helpful. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Bella, who's going to talk about poll watching.
Thanks, Jen. That was great. So let's talk about poll watches. So poll watches, as Jen already said, are people who are given special certificates so they can actually go inside the polling place and see what's happening in the polling place. Now, poll watchers have these special responsibilities, but as a poll watcher, you will probably spend some of your time greeting as well. So everything that you just heard about being a greeter is still applicable to you. You're still going to be seeing voters. You will be answering questions. You will be handing out ballots. But you should be also going inside the polling place and really being our eyes and ears and the voice of the Ridley Democrats at the polling place, and helping to make sure that voting is taking place according to the election laws. So one of the most important things to know is that you're not doing this by yourself. As Jen said, for the poll greeters, there are people to help. So it's very it's very important that you're aware of that and that you stay connected with everybody else in our committee and other poll watchers who are doing this work in Ridley Township. One of the things we do is we have a group me messaging app. This is a secure messaging app which can be downloaded on your phone. You will be invited to join that. You don't have to join it, but it will be set up before the election. You'll have the opportunity to put your phone number in, and then you'll be able to be part of a chat where you see what's going on at other polling places and see where people are having issues or questions, or sometimes just what they're having for lunch. But this will be your fastest way to get help. When you're a poll watcher, your job really is to just make sure that, as far as you can tell, that the election laws are being followed. So a lot of the stuff that we've already heard, it's your job to see, is this happening? So that includes the only people allowed inside the polling places are the election board officials, that is the poll workers, the voters themselves, and people who are holding poll watcher certificates. Election board officials may also include machine operators, people who help with the equipment. Enforcement of this is generally up to the judge of elections. So they may be enforcing this very strictly, or they may not be. Sometimes they do need help physically setting up and closing up the polling place. So they may be allowing other people in to help with that. As a poll watcher, you want to keep an eye on that, make sure that those people are not messing with the equipment, which hopefully is unlikely. If you see something that is improper or that you think is improper, and the judge of elections doesn't appear to be fixing it, you have the option to call election protection. We do want you to notify the rest of the folks working, poll watchers on the committee first before you do that, because we may be able to help you. We'll talk about that in a minute. Electioneering or politicking, discussing candidates or ballot issues is not allowed inside the polling place, inside that 10-foot restriction zone that the judge of elections sets up. So if you go in there and you hear people talking about what a great candidate so-and-so is, that really shouldn't be happening. Voters in line can wear their Conor Lamb t-shirt if they have it, but the poll workers should not be wearing anything that indicates what party they belong to or what candidate they support. Voters should also not be talking about candidates once they're inside the polling place. I don't know that every voter knows this. And it's important to know that any attempt to request voter information before or after someone has voted, other than having people sign in, may be viewed as a form of intimidation, which is why we want to wait until people come outside and say, hey, I want to help, before we ask for their name. Now, there are some things you want to really keep an eye out for. Are there partisan check-in tables being operated? So these would not be the election board table where you go in and give your name and sign in saying that you're getting ready to vote. These are tables that might be set up outside where people are actually asked to give information or being asked to check in. People you want to pay attention to are people being told outside, you're not on the list, this is not your polling place. That's not anybody else's job to do other than the election workers. This is something that we run into a lot, is a line of greeters set up by one party or another in front of the polling place that makes it difficult for people to walk inside. The entrances really need to be clear, and people should be able to walk through without being handed things or people standing in their way. And is there any other behavior going on that might be perceived as being harassing? We probably won't have this with this election because it is a primary, but we don't want things to be crowded inside, especially with social distancing, and only the people who are supposed to be in there should be in there. And then, is there adequate, is there any other odd or improper behavior going on in the lines? You want to keep an eye out for all of this. It's very important to remember that the members of the election board, so that is the people working inside, are all supposed to be neutral. They're going to walk in as members of a political party, but their job is to be neutral and to really be focused on helping every voter vote. So they're really not supposed to engage in any overly partisan behavior inside or outside the poll during the hours of the election. Now, in Ridley Township, many of the judges of election, the majority inspectors, and the people who assist them with managing the equipment are people who are very involved, obviously, in the Republican Party. Most of our majority inspectors, many of our Joes, are Republicans, and they're also involved in and related to the Republican-dominated municipal government and the school board. And that sometimes, I think, they behave as if they own the polling place, or if this is only for Republicans. Of course, it's not. That's why we're there. And so they may need a reminder every now and then that it's not their doorway to stand in, it's not their vestibule to take up all the space in, and that we are all there to make sure that everybody's able to vote. As Jen mentioned, you may see constables. Constables are uniformed officers. They are supposed to be called first when there is an issue that needs somebody in law enforcement to take care of it. In a dire emergency, the police would be called if there was danger to life or limb, but you are much more likely to see a constable than you are a Ridley police officer. Except to vote, they're only supposed to be inside the polling place at the request of the Joe. They can briefly visit a poll. They're not supposed to serve as partisan greeters. Again, in Ridley Township, the constables are also involved in our municipal government. In fact, they work for our municipal government, and they know a lot of these people. They may stop by, talk to their friends. And again, that may look intimidating to people who are coming in to vote. So just keep an eye on that. They do through the day sort of drive from one polling place to another, and they do sometimes hang out and talk to people. In an emergency, the Joe is instructed in the election board instructions to call the constables first before they call the police. So again, you may see them, and you may need to keep an eye on them. No voter is supposed to be turned away. So this is something else as a poll watcher that you do want to pay attention to. If somebody comes out and say they were not allowed to vote, have a conversation with them, find out what happened. If you see that happening inside, the judge of elections is usually very good at helping people find their polling place, explaining to them why they might not be allowed to vote. An independent will not be allowed to vote in this primary election, as Jen said. And so that will be a good reason for turning somebody away, but other people should be allowed to vote. A first-time voter may come without ID. They should go home and get their ID. They're not allowed to come back. So you will find, as Jen said, for the poll greeters, you will find from time to time that you can really help people by helping them to find their polling place if the judge of elections is not able to do that. The Joe should be calling the Delco voter registration office to find the polling place. You can also help them by using one of several websites. It's a good practice for you to actually have the link for the PA voter services saved in a browser on your phone so you can get to it quickly, as you may use it several times during the day. First-time voters. It's so exciting when you see that 18-year-old come up to the polling place voting for the first time. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that, and I've said to the young person, how exciting, how wonderful to you it is for you to vote for the first time. Do you have your ID? And they say no. So make sure that they have their ID before they go in to avoid disappointment. And I think it's really a nice practice just to really welcome those first-time voters, even if they are not for the party that we would like them to vote for. And the list of acceptable ID is earlier in this presentation. There are some voters who need assistance to vote. And so a voter must, if they need to be assisted in voting, perhaps they're not able to fill out the ballot, or they have difficulty seeing the ballot and they need assistance, they must request that assistance. There is a formal process for doing this. It's not always strictly followed. It's up to the it's up to the Joe's discretion as to how much to follow it. But there are some things that are very, very important. The judge of elections cannot be assisting the voter to fill out a ballot. The voter's employer cannot be assisting the voter, or the union rep or leader cannot be assisting voters, but other people can assist voters. So you may be asked on occasion to assist a voter to fill out their ballot. Other election workers may also help them fill out a ballot. There is a book where it is supposed to note who helped a voter. Election protection is, as Jen said earlier, there is election protection that there are election protection lawyers that are available. We, the Democrats, have lawyers, and the Republicans have lawyers. We ask you, if you feel like you're in a situation where you need to call election protection, we really would like you to also reach out to the rest of the committee and get some help in making that decision. The reason for that is when you call election protection, this time is extremely busy, and if you need them to answer a question that somebody else knows the answer to, it's better to call us first. So you can put that question into the group me messaging app. If you're not using it, you can contact Margaret Mansfield, and we'll make sure you have that number. If you do need to call election protection, make sure that you do that outside of the polling place, because the conversation you have may not be a conversation that everybody should be hearing. So you want to step outside of the polling place. If anything that is like really suspicious, you want to report that pretty quickly. You will have forms, some forms to fill out an incident report if you need to use them. It's good to get things in writing. And if you need to keep calling, keep trying until you get someone to answer. It says here you should not apply to any court for relief in the event of issue, but go through the boiler room. The boiler room is just this list of phone numbers, a phone chain that you would call until you actually get a reply. So if you're in that dire of a situation, make sure you're getting a lot of help. Contact information here, again, voter registration, several ways to find out where voters register where they're supposed to vote. www.pavoterservices.pa.gov has a lot of links in there that will help you find that. You will be getting phone numbers for election protection. You will be invited to the GroupMe app. The number is here for the Delco Dems headquarters. So lots of ways to get help. And this is just what the incident report looks like. Finally, it's the end of the day, and it's time to close the polls. So as a poll watcher, one of the most important things you can do for the committee and for candidates is to be there when the polls close. So you want to be inside the polls before 8 p.m. because 8 p.m. they lock the doors and nobody else can get in. You don't want to get left outside. The machines will be closed down. The clerks and the majority and minority inspectors will be very busy reconciling the books, counting the numbers of unused ballots, spoiled ballots, the number of ballots that are given out, and making sure that it all adds up. You want to pay attention to that. If there are discrepancies, you need to report that as quickly as possible. If you hear about any discrepancies, pay attention to what's happening. Don't just drift off until it's over. It's important to know that absentee ballots are not counted at polling places. These are done. These are actually canvassed separately. At the end of the night, when everything's closed down, the machines will print out. It kind of looks like CVS receipts of every vote that has been made. They'll print out 6 copies. You get to have one copy from every single machine. We would like to have those copies. Well, not the copies. We'd like to at least have a photo of those copies. So we'll tell you at the end of the day where to text the pictures of the copies, and hang on to the copy, the tally, in case we need it in the future. So you're entitled to, as a watcher, you're entitled to getting one of those tallies. Make sure you stay there. Make sure you get it. election workers will take all of the election materials, pack them back up, put them in sealed bags, and they will be taken to assigned drop-off locations so that all of the final canvassing of the votes can be done. And then you can go home and put your feet up. So, so again, thank you very much for serving. The free and fair elections can only happen with dedicated volunteers like you. So we're really grateful for your service.